Hi, everyone, and welcome to our series on consulting with different professionals who are struggling with a particular area of documentation. And today we are talking to the wonderful Sandy Demopoulos, who is a social worker in New York. And Sandy, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and your practice?
Okay, and Lisa, thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for working with me. I'm very excited about it. So I am a licensed clinical social worker, registered. So I accept Medicare, and I have, aside from that, I have just a fee-for-service private practice part-time. I also do DWI assessments and SAP assessments. SAP is for people under the umbrella of the Department of Transportation. So anybody that works on the roads, drives a truck, has a CDL license. I had a pilot once, and if there's a, sorry about that.
That's okay.
If there's a question about whether they were drinking or they have a positive urine, they get suspended until they have an assessment and a decision about level of care. So I do that. And my private practice is, and we're ignoring the phone. My private practice is people that have alcohol or drug-related issues for the most part. So that might mean adult children alcoholics, or a partner of an alcoholic, or the alcoholic or drug addict themselves.
Okay, so yeah, so definitely a very heavy focus on substance use, and you said you do see some people who are court-ordered, correct?
That's right.
Cool. Very important for discussing what we're going to discuss today, which is policies.
Yes.
And setting up forms related to those policies and all that good stuff. So your question was pretty open-ended, and you are just looking for some general help with outlining your policies a little bit further, correct?
Yes, I just have the one confidentiality policy. I haven't broadened or built up. I've been in private practice for a couple of years, but I haven't built up my policies, feeling a little overwhelmed by it.
Yeah, and there's so much. And before we started recording, Sandy showed me this giant book she has from a HIPAA specialist, and there's so many different things to consider with your policies. And unfortunately, just because of the legal environment, we do have to create these longer and longer forms, it seems. But we will talk a little bit about maybe how to make those a little bit more friendly and shorten them too.
Excellent.
Cool.
User-friendly.
Yes. Awesome. All right. So this is the policy that you have, and it's the brief version of Notice of Privacy Practices. And a lot of the language is really, really similar to the model Notice of Privacy Practices on the government website, actually. So I think that's really good. And then you talk specifically about, are people okay by being contacted by electronic media and providing their information if they are, all that good stuff.
I'm a big Roy Huggins fan.
Yeah, me too. I'm always promoting his stuff. Like, it seems like every time I do a training or anything, I'm talking about him. So I'm telling him he needs to give me I need some kind of a kickback or something. I don't know.
He promotes you too.
Yeah, that's true. So this, I went ahead and pulled this up since you had sent me that before. This is actually the model Notice of Privacy Practices that is written by hhs.gov. It's available on hhs.gov. So actually, anyone watching or for yourself, if you just Google model Notice of Privacy Practices, this is the one that will come up. You will get this particular web page. Let me bring it over here so you can see it. Can you see the web page now?
Yes.
Cool. So you will get to this web page, and you'll scroll down. Don't get scared by all this stuff. There is a little instruction booklet if you want, or you can skip ahead and just click on the actual provider examples. So they give 4 different examples. These are meant for individual providers. They have them in different languages. If you go down here, that's more for health plans. So those of us in private practice don't need that. And they have different options that are based on different looks. So it's really nice because they actually did some research on this and figured out, like tested this with different clients and adjusted the forms to see, you know, what they liked best, what kind of language they found was easiest to understand. So the forms are pretty good. I don't even, you know, like have this in my paperwork packet. I just give a link and say, you know, go ahead and use this free one. It's great. It's there. It's from the government. So you can either, they said that this was the most popular one, which is this, it's meant to be like a booklet that you hand out. And so people really like the fact that you'll see it's talking about similar things that you have in your policy, right? Like how do you request confidential communication? How are you sharing their information? How can they get copies of their records? But it's breaking it down into this very like easy to understand, layered type of format. So they do that, and then they go through your choices.
Is this a Word or a PDF?
This is a PDF, and so for this one, people can adjust it. So you can see, you can add that in there.
Cool.
That one is like a booklet. This one, the layered version, is actually my favorite. So this is like a full page. So this is if you were just going to print out like 8.5 by 11 pages. And again, you can adjust these to enter in your own name. And it has everything right here.
Nice.
So your rights, your choices, our uses and disclosures, and then it tells people where to go. So the nice thing is that there's a really brief synopsis on the first page. And then if people want more information on a particular topic, they can jump right into that.
That's great.
Yeah, so these are really nice because they look like pretty good and they've been tested and people liked these versions. Now the other option is the text version, which, sorry, I shouldn't have put that away, but you can also download that directly from the website. So you'll see here, NPPHC provider text version. So that just gives you this form right here. This is it. It's a Word document. So this is if you just want to like copy and paste into, you know, your own form, which a lot of people would prefer to do. But it has it laid out the same way, where it's the layered summary in the beginning, and then it goes more in depth with each point. So I would say, you know, this is a great place to start, even if you just take the text version and copy and paste it. And the layering is a really nice way for people to, for you to highlight what's like the really important stuff, and then for people to easily be able to browse through it and check it out.
Very nice.
So what are your thoughts on that so far?
I like it. I mean, I haven't read, I'm just scanning, but
yeah.
you know, it's, I mean, I guess you want something that's scannable.
Exactly. Yeah. Because most people, you know, and actually, since you brought up Roy Huggins, you know, he and I did a training on informed consent, and which is available on his website. And we talked about this concept of layering and informed consent, and the fact that informed consent is a process. It's not a form, right? It's like an actual conversation you have with people. It's something that's ongoing. It's not simply a form you have someone fill out one time and then never talk to them about. And one of the things that Roy is really good about pointing out is, you know, especially a lot of the technology related stuff that he ends up dealing with, people may not want to talk about right away, or may not think it's a big deal, you know, at the first session when you're going through some of your forms, but then it often comes up later on, like when they text you because they're running late, even though they already said that they wouldn't text you, or they send a random email about something or whatever. So, so that was one of the things we focused on, is that it's really an ongoing process. So this lets you highlight those key points. And if somebody like that does click for them, so I think you mentioned like you have you see some people court ordered for like domestic violence.
Yes.
So like that's a situation where sometimes people really don't want text messages, popping up on their home screen,
Yeah.
so that anybody who's just by their phone can see you texting about an appointment, or considering like how do they even put you in their phone, right? Does it say like my therapist? Does it say your name? Yeah. Does it identify who you are in any way? So those are the conversations you want to have with people, and you'll want to, those are things you're going to have general policies about, but you will go more in depth in a conversation, right? Because for some people, it's going to be more important to go into a little bit more detail than with others.
Mm-hmm.
So like when considering a policy, your policy might be that you allow people to text and email about appointments only. You don't reply regarding clinical content. And then you'll want to outline how quickly people can expect a reply from you. Because a lot of times people expect text messages to be replied to right away.
Is that in here?
This is not in here. So this is just the notice of privacy practices, which is related to HIPAA. But it doesn't go in depth as far as all that stuff. And we can get into that in a little bit. But as you hear from people different concerns that they have, you'll want to go more in depth into different areas and kind of work it through with them. So one thing that is on this notice of privacy practices, and that's a good point, we should kind of back up. So this is related to HIPAA in particular, which at least in the United States is definitely becoming the standard of care, even if you're not technically a HIPAA covered entity. So all of these things that are in this form, I would say most therapists should have in their policies regardless, because they do address very basic things, right? Like if you look at the top here, people's rights, how do they get a copy of their records? Well, people have access. That's the whole point of HIPAA. We often focus on the privacy part of it, but not the access part of it, which is one of the A's. So a big part of HIPAA is that we as clients, as patients, are able to access our medical information, right? So I can go to my doctor and I can say, I want a copy of my record. I want to see what's in there. I want to look at my labs. I want to be able to take it to whomever I want. And our clients have those rights as well. So here, you have a right to get a copy of your record, to request changes to it if you feel there are errors. That's a whole other thing we could go into. That's very rare, but even to get a copy of this notice, etc. To file a complaint if they believe their rights have been violated. And I noticed you had that in your policy as well.
I do.
And then choices. So the fact that people do have choices, right? They don't have to go and see you, even if they're court ordered for therapy. They probably have like a list of people they're able to see. And even with court ordered therapy, they could technically decide not to go, right? Now they would have consequences they need to deal with as a result of that. But that is their choice. So again, that's another great example of wanting to have a discussion with someone. You're going to have a different discussion with a private pay client coming to see you because they're concerned about their drinking than you are about someone who is court ordered to come see you.
Well, they're usually the same person.
Yeah. Yeah.
So would you put that in the choices that, if you're mandated, you have a choice of, if you're mandated to treatment, like, should I put that in writing? You have a choice of seeing me, somebody else, or, whatever the, legal consequences of refusing treatment are?
Yeah, for you, since you do, not everyone sees court-ordered people, so they may not have to worry about it, but since you do see court-ordered people, I would put in there something about, the fact that they have options, whatever those options are, however that works. Okay. And the fact that, and however it limits their confidentiality. So, like, are you expected to report on whether or not they attend? And how much do you report on? So maybe you only report on whether or not they attend. Maybe you are expected to provide like a summary of progress or a treatment summary. at different points in time. Maybe you're expected to collaborate with different people, like a probation officer or a social work, another social worker. So those are things that you'll want to outline, because that's probably pretty much the same for all of your court-ordered cases.
Well, drug court is an alternative to incarceration, and that has, they want a progress report every month. And then somebody else who has a DWI, they just want, did they attend and participate? And do you have, can you send a copy of the urine screens? So they don't all want details, and I try to send as little as possible.
Right. So you may, if it's pretty structured and it's only like 2 or 3 scenarios, you may have a couple of bullet points for each of those.
Okay.
If it's more complicated than that, then you may just give a general synopsis, like of how their confidentiality may be impacted, and then say that you'll have a conversation with them about it.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So if it's really complex, then just do the general overview. And then what you would do is, in your first session with them, when you write your note, you would document in your note what you outline with that particular person.
Okay.
So the fact that you reviewed, the fact that you'd be giving a monthly progress report, and, what you tend to put in the report, and, possible consequences if they do not attend sessions.
Okay.
So that's what I would recommend. So then the other thing that this form in particular goes into, and if you don't have if someone's watching and they don't have a notice of privacy practices they're using, again, it includes a lot of the same stuff that you would have in a general services agreement. So there's a lot of crossover, and that's fine.
Okay. Could you just make the type larger, maybe, Lisa?
Oh yeah. Let's see here. Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Cool. Good point. So then the next thing you might want to consider, so uses and disclosures. So I know one of the things that we talked about before we started recording was, you said you want to talk about billing stuff and payment. So that is one of the big points in the notice of privacy practices, because HIPAA is really related to insurance, right? And it's about how insurance companies, well, it only technically applies to people who bill to insurance companies, or check insurance status online. So the payment stuff is really important in this notice of privacy practices, because you want to disclose that if anyone else is paying for this service, a lot of times that limits someone's confidentiality. So like court-ordered cases, typically the client is paying themselves, but you are reporting to someone else, whether or not they're attending, things like that. Whereas with like insurance, someone else, an insurance company, is paying for the services, and so they want to know that the services are actually happening. And so a lot of times they will ask for records, or call to check up, things like that. So that's something you want to make sure that you let people know.
Okay.
Here also, when you're talking about your billing policies, is where you could put in what to do in relation to non-payment. So I know you said that you had an issue with that, correct?
Just once.
Yeah, and once is good enough to make you think like, oh, I better have a policy on this, right? And you might be in practice for years and never have it happen, and so it's not really a big deal. And hopefully it doesn't happen to most of us, but a lot of people do have that occur. So you do want to have a policy about, like, if you accept checks, do you charge a fee for a bounced check? If someone doesn't pay, what are the consequences? So if someone doesn't pay at their session today, does that mean that they can't have another session until they pay? Are there any fees related to a late payment? How do you go about collecting those fees that are overdue? So, do you submit it to a collections agency? Which we are allowed to do, but you just want to give people a heads up that if there's non-payment after X amount of time, then, I will submit this to a collections agency.
So put that in the policy and discuss it when it happens. I mean, not discuss it in the first session.
Yeah, I wouldn't typically discuss it in the first session. I would make sure people have a copy of the policy so they can reference it.
Okay.
And that's one of those things that you then ask them, do you have any questions about any of these forms, anything that you filled out, anything related to payment, making appointments, kind of like general topics.
Okay.
And then see if they do. Another option, do you use an electronic health record or paper?
I do.
Okay, you do.
I use council.com.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's what I use too. So, so in council, I know that you can have people sign at different points in the form. You can insert like a signature line.
Oh, I haven't used that.
Yeah, so what I do is I have a statement about, for example, like that I'm going to charge. So what I do for payment is I get their credit card number and I charge their credit card within the system because it saves their credit card. And that way, even if they no-showed, I would be able to, unless they went in like deleted their card or something, I'd be able to charge them for the session.
So I'm very conscious of being HIPAA adherent. And I talked to somebody from the electronic health record company, and they said that storing the credit card on the chart is not HIPAA compliant.
Storing it on paper is not HIPAA compliant. If you store it online through a secure system, if the system is secure, then it is. So for example, if you have anything in your electronic health record, if they are saying that they're keeping out all of the information safe, then it is safe. Also, the other part with credit cards is what is processing the credit card payment. So through council, they're actually using a company called Stripe. So you set up, I think you would have set up Stripe, or they might have another option too, but I use Stripe.
I use Square. I just started with Square before I had council, so I'm just keeping that.
Okay, so maybe they just set it up through there. So for example, like online, when I click the button to charge their card, Stripe is processing it. And the reason that Stripe is charging a fee is because they are maintaining all of the security related to credit cards. So you do have to make sure that you are using a system, like if you just typed in somebody's credit card and saved it to your computer, no, that wouldn't be safe. Even writing it down on paper, if people keep paper files, having someone write their credit card number down on paper and then signing that they, you can charge it whenever, that is not secure. So you only want to use people's credit card numbers when it's being secure, processed through a secure system.
Okay, so if I'm not using one of the ones that they recommend, I'm already using something else, how do I store the credit card information?
It depends on, I'm honestly not 100% sure about Square. I would assume that Square is meeting those requirements because it's a fairly big one, but I don't know that for sure. So you can either use like within the electronic health record, most of them are set up to do that securely. So you could do that, or you can use IVPay as a system that's specifically for therapists that is secure, that I've gotten a lot of great feedback about, people love. Yeah, so those are different options you can check out. I just like having everything in one spot.
Yeah.
But if you're already using something separate to do the credit card payment, then,
I don't keep the numbers. I just bill them when they come. So I don't have a way to bill for no-shows because I don't keep them because I don't have a secure way, or I don't know what the secure way is to keep them secure.
Yeah, so you should be able to do it in council.
Okay.
You just have to use Stripe as your processor instead, which isn't that complicated. And I think most EHRs use Stripe as well. Okay. And yeah, so but it's all about what you want to do. If you just want to keep doing it the way you have been, then you just write that in your policy, and make sure, so perhaps your policy would be that their last session's fee would be due at their next session. So if they do come again, then you would be charging them for 2 sessions. And then of course the issue is, what if they don't come again? And that's when you outline, you would want to give people notice. You wouldn't want to say, I'm just going to send it to collections right away. So you would outline, what is your time frame? Do you wait 2 weeks and then another 2 weeks and then send it to collections? How do you notify people? Are you going to send them something in the mail? Are you going to send them an email? Are you going to call them? So those are things that you'd want to consider, like what is your process for following up on payment?
Okay.
And even if, even in counsel, somebody could go in to their client portal and delete their credit card, right? So it's still something that I have to consider. It's just that most people don't do that, but I have heard of therapists experiencing that where someone gave them their credit card and then they stopped the card or whatever, and so they never got payment. So those things do happen.
Would that go in use and disclosures?
That I would not necessarily have in a category here. So for that, I would just have a general, so this is my services agreement that I have as a part of my paperwork packet. Okay. And so I have all the different types of policies are broken down. So basically when we're talking about forms, they're just written formats of your policies, right? They're just proof of your policy. So what I would do is have a general payment category. Yeah. And have all of that stuff in there. Okay. And list out if you do super bills or insurance, something like that, your fees, when your fees are due, how you will handle collecting payment if there is a non-payment, what fees are due if people no-show, that kind of stuff. Okay. So this, I also used kind of that layering model. So it's just kind of like a general welcome letter, and then kind of highlighting the big points, right? Which is, confidentiality, what therapy entails, appointments. So the fact that, I do require 24-hour cancellation, how I communicate, payment, which is mostly, here's going to be your fee, and then insurance. So these are just the big points, and then the rest of the form goes into detail about all of these.
Yes, I get it. Very good.
Yeah, so that's kind of people can browse that pretty easily. So this goes into, these are all different things that you'd want to have policies on, confidentiality, the process of therapy, making sure people understand risks and benefits, and how things may change over time, course of treatment, which is, how long you do an assessment. Some people do an extended assessment period. Some people don't. Some people, and then you can outline how you would like therapy to end. And the fact that you may have to refer people out if they have special needs about something or something comes up. Appointments, you definitely want to have some sort of a policy around canceled and missed appointments. And then also when people show up late, just letting them know, if they show up late, you're fine to see them, but if they show up 30 minutes late, they're only going to get, 15, 20 minutes of a session, whatever. Then emergency procedures. So this is something I added in that not everybody has in their consent form necessarily, but everybody should have totally blanking on the name right now, but a will. Yes, a professional will. That's what it is. Yeah. So, you don't share your professional will with clients, right? That's a whole separate form you have for yourself. But I do.
My buddy, take over my. I sublet, and I just said to my buddy, just take over my cases.
Yeah.
Isn't that the same thing as a professional will?
An informal one, right?
Yeah.
So what we do, so I have actually Nicole from Therapist Corp Rep. So like she would be my person. And so I add it in here just so that people know, like, if something crazy happened, she's going to call you. And that's it. But, you know, that's pretty much all they need to know. And then communication. So I just named it general communication and then talked about emails, cell phones, texting, and different information about each of those. So like, how do I want to communicate? Our main form of communication outside the office will be via phone. And then here you might want to add like your office hours, when you typically answer phone calls. Do you answer phone calls within 24 to 48 hours? Does that not include weekends? You know, those are the things that you want to think about. And then with email and texting, the big thing is just to let people know that it's not secure. It's fine if they want to email you about appointments and stuff like that, but, you know, just making sure they understand their rights around that, because they do have the right to contact us via those means, but they want to think about their privacy.
So council has the encrypted email.
Yeah.
So I use that.
Yeah, that's what I use too, because that way they just get an email that says you have a message, and there's no content in the email. So it pretty much solves that problem, right? Because then they have to log into council in order to get whatever the information is. I do still have some people who will just like send an email, but not usually.
Yeah.
So the next part, I'll just kind of browse through. Another thing you want to have a policy on is social media.
Yes, definitely.
You'll see that mine is fairly short. I choose to do that on purpose because social media is changing so much, so rapidly. It's impossible to say, like, on Instagram, this is how I interact with you. On Facebook, this is how I et cetera. So I just have it very general that, you know, I don't interact with people via social media, that I won't acknowledge that they're a client. And there's even a comment here at the end: I may remove your communication, comment, message from my account if I feel it violates your confidentiality. So somebody, like, if you had a Facebook page and someone like listed some huge post about everything that happened in their last session, right? That's something you'd want to delete. That's pretty rare. Usually you don't have to worry about stuff like that, but, you know, you just want to think about it.
Do you write blogs, posts?
Yes, I do.
And do your patients see those?
They do. And so you can have, let's see, is there a comment in here? So you can add more to that if you want. Like, I do not expect you to follow any of my accounts based on our work together. So if you do a newsletter, blog posts, if you have a YouTube channel where you do videos, you can say, you know, I don't expect you to follow us, you know, to follow me and follow what I do, and that you're not going to be disappointed if someone didn't see a YouTube video that was very relevant to them, right? And then the other part is just making sure that people know it's not anything about them personally. Like, if you don't accept them as a friend or as a contact, it's simply that you have a policy that you don't accept clients as contacts or friends or whatever. So if you look up, Keely Combs is a psychologist in California who has a social media policy that is very extensive. It's like multiple.
How do you spell her name?
Keelykolmes. And
K-O-M-E-S?
yes, Keely Combs.
K-O-L-M-E-S. Okay.
Yes, and she has a very extensive social media policy that she shares with people. So obviously my little 2 paragraphs is quite different from her multiple page social media policy. And that's because she does go through like each social media avenue and outlines how she interacts with people. So you just want to consider it. You know, if it's something that you're more concerned about, maybe you take that route. But that's available for free, so you can check that out if you want. Even if you would just want different ideas for language.
Mm-hmm.
Payment, so we talked about that. So that's where I would put like, how you're going to follow up with people on payment. Here, I also add in that they can get receipts if they want, a receipt for their charges. And then I have that little signature section here that is just acknowledging that they know I'm going to charge their card if they don't cancel. So you can do that if you're using paper or if you're using a system that allows you to like insert little initial spots or signature spots at different places in the form where you really want to highlight that people need to acknowledge they have understood this policy in particular. You can do that. So that's why I do that here with the payment one. You could do that with your court policy. You could have, initial here. And that way they're acknowledging, yes, I read through this whole form and I specifically really took note of this one particular part. So like for you, that might be more important since
Mm-hmm.
that's like a common concern with the clients you're seeing.
Mm-hmm.
Insurance, let's see, the last one I think we'll review real quick is the court policy. And the other things I go through are just, we'll get to the court policy, but you want to make sure that people understand how you're licensed, who they can contact if they want to complain about you.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that you keep records and they have the right to review them.
Mm-hmm.
Collateral involvement. So this is something I just simply added in, but I just have a statement about, the fact that I'm not going to speak to their family members unless we think it's helpful and I have their permission.
Mm-hmm.
And then I do have a disclosure here that I do consult with other licensed mental health professionals about cases, but only if it's going to, if I can still protect their confidentiality, and if it wouldn't, then I'll talk with them about it.
Mm-hmm.
So for court stuff, and I'm not going to go too in depth here. So I have adopted this court policy from Nicole Stoller-Peterson from Therapist Court Prep.
Mm-hmm.
So if you just want a court policy, then you can check out her website. I think it's like $37 or something, and you can just buy the court policy. And hers is a little bit more extensive. I adopted it from hers, but made some adjustments. So she has two options, and one is like if you want to avoid going to court, and one is if you really don't mind going to court. So out of respect for her, I'm not going to keep it up like super long for people to like totally copy. I'm just going to go back to our regular screen here. So now do you just see me?
I see you.
Cool. So with a court policy, the things that you want to consider are, you're so popular today.
It's my persistent son, but you know what? I can move into the other room.
No, we're good. We're good.
Okay.
We're almost done here too, because we want to keep the time frame a little bit shorter. But and you want to check up on your son. But with a court policy, you want to consider the fact that it costs you money to go to court, right? Mm-hmm. So if a client needs you to show up in court, that might be perfectly fine, but you need to consider how much money are you losing out on if you have to spend a whole day of missing clients. And you want to think about the fact that court usually takes way longer than you think it's going to take. So you want to plan for the whole day, not just like, oh yeah, I'll be in court for an hour. No, because it might completely rearrange your whole schedule. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing Nicole recommends that I really like, which is she says like, just bill for the day. Mm-hmm. And then you also want to consider your prep time, because if you are going to court, you should take some time looking through your records and prepare ahead of time. And so that's something you can kind of price in to that daily fee. Mm-hmm. If you don't want to go to court, then you can obviously say that you do not go to court unless, if you have a subpoena or a court order, like we all have to follow that, right? We all have to go.
We don't have to go?
We all do. Yeah.
We do have to go if there's a subpoena.
Yeah, or a court, or, you know, if a judge says you have to do something, you have to do it, right? So, so none of us can have a policy that says we never go to court or we never release anything, because, you know, we can't say that's never going to happen. So that's why it is good to at least outline how much you would charge for something like that if it did happen. One thing that you might have happen a lot would be like letters, or like those progress letters or statements that people need for court.
You do that.
So you can charge for those, but you'd want to have that in your policy. Like, how much do you charge? Some people charge like a flat rate, like $25. Some people charge just their hourly rate and charge for an hour or however long it takes them. And that's up to you, but it's, especially if it's something you do a lot, then you might want to charge for it.
I write letters. I haven't charged for it. Didn't occur to me that I could. But.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't. And if it's just like quickie stuff, it may not be a big deal, but it is an option. So we went through a lot of stuff. I know it was kind of like an overview, a big overview, but I hope it gave you a lot of ideas of the type of things that you want to consider when you're putting your policy together or revising it to make it a little bit more in depth.
Yes, yes, very enlightening.
It's
not as awful as I thought it would be.
Yeah, yeah. And I would say, you know, hopefully you saw, I tried like in my policy to keep the language professional, but it's not super stoic or stodgy or anything. And I use I because it's just me. And you can use kind of layman's terms for a lot of things, and don't worry too much about how it's written, of course. And you can always have, you know, a lawyer review your forms to make sure that things are clear and stuff like that. But I would say, you know, really just consider like, okay, when I bill people, what do I do? All right. And that's what you write down. That's your policy. You know, when people no show, what do I do? Okay, that's my policy. When, you know, I'm asked for a court letter, what do I typically do? Okay, that's my policy on court letters. And then you just write it out.
Yep. Make it sound so easy.
But I would say, you know, it's, you know, kind of check out some things and then maybe schedule, you know, like a 2-hour chunk of time where you sit there and just kind of start with those bullet points of like social media, court policy, communication, billing or payment, and then just kind of, you know, fill them in and see how it goes from there. And then you can always, of course, adjust your policy.
As far as counsel and putting in those check marks or the signature, should I talk to the contact person I have there to figure that out?
Yeah, because I can't think off the top of my head like exactly how you do it when you're adjusting the forms, but they were able to do it really easily. So I'm sure if you just contact them, they can walk you through it.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's definitely an option, and I recommend if you do have really specific things, you know, why not have people initial at different points in the form so that you're making sure they pay attention to, you know, cancellations and payment and all that stuff.
Is there anything that I should ask that I didn't ask?
I don't think so. There's so much we could go through with policies, but I think we did a pretty good job of doing like an overview. So I hope that answers the questions that you have. I know it still means there's a lot more work to do, but but hopefully that makes it easier. And that's what I would say, you know, if you really want to like make a big change, you just have to set aside a few hours of time and sit down with all that stuff and say, okay, like this is it. I'm going to do it. Cool.
So how do I sign up to be one of your groupies?
Well, I will have some links, I'm sure, in this video for people to check that out and learn more about the full program, because I am going to have the Meaningful Documentation program running in June and July of this year. So that will be fun. So I will provide information on how to do that for people.
Mhm.
And I'll give you that link as well. But right now it's not, while we're recording, it's not open yet.
Okay.
Well, Sandy, thank you so much for your time and for asking the questions that a lot of people have and being really open to going a lot more in depth with this.
It's an honor to, to be your guinea pig and to put myself on display as I might say a typical therapist that tries to stay out of, like the business end and the details. I want to be in the office with the client. I don't really want to do paperwork.
Yeah.
So I think that's pretty representative. So thank you for making that less painful.
Absolutely. You're very welcome.
Even painless. It wasn't as bad as I thought, really.
Yeah, and it's not, I think that is it. Sometimes we just have to talk about it and you see some examples and then you realize like, oh, okay, this isn't so bad. It will take, like doing your policies does take a little bit of time, but it doesn't have to be a huge, scary task and you don't have to look through that giant folder of HIPAA stuff to have a pretty good policy. You can just steal that form from the hhs.gov website.
All right. Well, thanks for being so helpful.
Thank you.